Going live?
Yeah.
Ooh, we
And
are
we are
live.
live.
Wow, perfect. So, hey everyone, welcome to this creative exchange. It's me, Marcus from DB here, and then we have Abe, Senior Creative Director at GoPro. We have Spencer, aka Gimbal God, and then we have Sage, who's one of our snowboarding athletes and also one of the best dudes at delivering content to us. We're super happy to have you guys here. This is, I think it's our 16th or 17th creative exchange by now, and we touch on everything from kind of topics, everything from design to how to get a job in the outdoor world. And today we were thinking of going really deep on GoPro geekiness and creating content. We have Tin who's popping in and out of the chat. He's going to kind of help moderate the questions here for all of you. So we always love getting a lot of comments and questions in the chat. So if you have anything, just let us know there and we will try to answer them as fast as possible. I was almost thinking of starting before we do another like longer introduction round. I was almost thinking, everybody who's watching, can't you guys write in the comments where you guys are listening in from? That would be amazing. And Abe and Sage and Spenny, you can almost do that as well. Or you can say where you guys are from while we're waiting to get the answers. Abe, where are you calling in from?
Yeah, I'm from my home in San Diego. It is the morning here, 8 a.m., and looking like it's a little cloudy outside, actually.
And Sage?
I'm calling in from San Diego as well. I'm originally from Park City, Utah, but I'm down here to throw the first pitch at a baseball game. So excited,
So cool.
kind of
Yeah.
nervous.
Well, I'm not in San Diego. That is where I'm from, but I'm calling in from Indonesia, and it is 11 p.m. actually. So
It was so funny when we tried to arrange this call. It was like the DB office is either in Oslo, where we have the headquarters, but the whole creative team sits in Stockholm. And then trying to fix this with Abe and Spenny basically being on two different sides of the planet is always a nice challenge. It's always going to be an early morning for someone and a late night. Here we have some comments coming in. Verona, Slovenia, Barcelona, Oslo, Denver, Tahoe. Abe, isn't that where you always go and shoot your star laps?
Near it. I go to Mammoth mostly, but Tahoe's just a little bit.
That's what it is. Innsbruck, Portugal. We have a lot of Portugal repping here. And Italy. It would be super, super nice as well to just, it's always fun for us to hear and listen in as well, where you guys heard about this. Did you get it from an email? Did you see it from Abe, Sage, or Spenny's channels? Or where did you get a notice from this? That's always super fun, and see how people kind of get a hold of these events as well. On the way to Hintertux, getting the first snow.
Wow.
Jealous.
I think Hintertux is getting hit pretty hard right now.
Yeah,
Tons
I saw the dump report that it was coming a lot of snow in the Alps now with the rains that's coming.
Portland, Hanks Towers. What's up? That's where I'm from.
Okay, sick. Let's do a quick introduction round. Maybe like Abe, it would be super fun to just hear a little bit more like what you do at the GoPro, how long you've been there, and kind of your first interaction with a GoPro.
No problem. Yeah, what's up, everybody? I have been at GoPro pretty much my entire life, which is kind of crazy. It's been 14 years now, but I started at GoPro right after college. I was in Mammoth running a ski team for my college in LA, USC, and I started a YouTube channel, and the people at GoPro reached out, and at that point, it was only like 8 people working for the company, and sounded like a really cool opportunity. I studied engineering in school, and so to go somewhere where I could not do engineering and I could still go skiing and stuff sounded like a great idea. So I did that, and still there today. And I've been kind of in charge of, had a hand in all of the launch videos that we've done all the way back to the Hero one, basically. I do all of the post color correction on our commercials and launch videos and stuff. And now since I've been there for so long, I do a lot more on the engineering side, trying to make the products better, trying to get all of the stuff that I know everybody's asking for into the cameras, make them better, make them easier to use, and try to just make better products.
It's so sick. It's been super fun following your journey as well. Like from we started connecting way back, it's crazy how big the company's been and stuff.
Yeah. It's been a roller coaster.
And Sage, brief intro for everybody who hasn't met you.
Yeah. My name's Sage Kotzenberg. Like I said before, I'm from Park City, Utah. I basically grew up with a snowboard strapped to my feet and started trying to ditch as much school as I could for snowboarding. And it just became my life pretty much after the Olympics came to Salt Lake in 2002. We just got so hooked on it as a family. And I started just snowboarding as much as I could with my friends and starting doing good and competing. And my parents would take us to the local contests and everything. And that started it for me. I really liked competing. I'm a pretty competitive person within myself. And ended up taking me all around the world and actually get to hang out with Abe and Spencer quite a bit. Me and Spencer have filmed a lot of stuff together. I'm sure people in the chat have probably seen that. It's been really fun, and we'll always be having more to come for sure.
We have Spenny.
My turn. Well, I guess I kind of started filming with Sage back in the day, and I really didn't start off with a GoPro too much earlier on. Before that, I think it was maybe around like 2012 or so that I got really into filming on a GoPro. And my main reason for filming with one was I didn't have any money for a camera. And one of my friends and mentors, Davis Paul, used to actually work with Abe and gave me one of the first cameras. I think it was like a GoPro SD. And I remember he told me to just like try and go film some people around the park. And I think I did a little bit and then put it down. And I was focusing on a professional snowboard career back in the day, or aspiring to be that. And then, at a certain point, I kind of realized that wasn't the path for me. And I started kind of picking Davis's brain a lot and watching Abe's USC videos, and then kind of started to learn how to edit. And then it was kind of funny because way back before the GoPro had GPS built into the device, Sage worked with a company called Trace. And my job was to basically create the social media for them at the very start of Instagram. And my job that I convinced them was basically to make the snow content, and Sage was the only snowboarder. So Sage had me over for Christmas one year, and we filmed like probably some of the first follow cams, and that would have been like 2015. And to think 9 years later that we're all in a DB chat talking about GoPros is pretty crazy.
So awesome.
The full circle moment.
Yeah, we definitely, there's a lot of history between the three of us on GoPro shoots, and it's always like the highlight of my year is when I get to go on a shoot with these two guys, because I know it's going to be a good time.
That's
me as well. I learn a lot by the minute whenever I'm around you.
Yeah, I know. Abe is someone you can trust with. He's like, hand me the camera and like, we'll just go ride. And you're like, let me know what to do.
You do the settings.
Yeah. Help me help you.
It always feels like you become like what do you call it, SpongeBob, when you are close to Abe. You just like need to soak in all the new information. You come back and you're like, fuck, I'm the new master. And then the next time you meet Abe, you're like, oh, so much to learn.
He puts out a Hero 13 shark follow cams. Like, what was that? A
But I was thinking, for everybody listening, I was thinking that we do like this. So we can almost go, we have got on our email and our socials, and you guys normally get a lot of like frequently asked questions as well, and a lot of them. So I was thinking we take that a little bit in the end. And guys, please let us know in the comments if you have any questions. It can be super, super technical. We have a few really technical questions. I was thinking we take that in the back end of the half, and now we can start with, I would love to see a little bit of like content Spenny that, you know, you've shot, and Abe as well, and what you kind of like with it. And then of course, Abe, the new camera from GoPro has come out with new ND filters and stuff. So would love to hear what you kind of are most excited about with the new product and what things you can capture with it. I saw that Benny and you were out filming a video as well with showing, you know, the new kind of how you can double smoothen shots when driving and stuff like that, and also with the new ND filter. So it would be super fun to hear that as well.
Yeah. Where do we start?
Benny, do you have any, I heard that you had a few shots that you wanted to show.
I do. We might as well start. I have a really cool shot from Chile of my buddy Brandon Davis that is not on the internet yet. So here, I'm going to do my screen share. And yep.
Let's see if this works.
Yep, this is it's not, okay, yep, okay. So how's that? Whoa, that looks crazy, but let's not go there.
Careful.
Okay, yeah, super careful right now. We're gonna go. We got to, okay.
This is great. Now we see how structured you are in your folder organization as well.
Yeah, right.
That's good. That's good, actually.
I know. Well, I have the 8x7 social. Yep. Okay. And so one thing I also want to touch on with this, we'll show the 16:9 first, but one of my favorite things about the GoPro in general is the 8x7, but we'll start off with the 16:9. And can you guys see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not. Oh.
Ooh.
Oh, man.
So sick.
That looks insane.
That looks absolutely insane.
Oh.
Yeah, and I was really stoked. This was the first run I shot in 5 months.
Oh, man.
Wow.
And then
Boom.
just like after, so that's the 16:9 crop. And then we might as well show the 8x7. And I just think it's so cool how expansive the GoPro shoots, and you can really crop it for whatever you want. I kind of noticed that I shot this a little pointed down, but that's what's so rad about the 8x7 is you can kind of adjust for the crop in post. And if I wanted it to be a 9x16, I also have the ability to crop into that. So that honestly. And how do I stop screen sharing?
There you go.
Sick.
So yeah, and like Sage can kind of touch on this, but like I feel like that clip was kind of the culmination of like a decade of learning and snow conditions and it all lining up. It was just kind of the best day of the season in Chile. Conditions were stable. It's not all the time that you get to put two people on a slope like that. But also between the 8x7 and Abe can touch on the GP log, but I've been super stoked on the GP log because it makes it really easy to be able to match to like other cameras. For instance, like Sage and I will film with the Red cameras quite often for some of the bigger movie projects. And I really think that this new Hero 13, it kind of takes what is a camera that costs less than my memory card and, you know, has the quality to match a $50,000 camera. So I've been pretty psyched on that.
It looks amazing.
Do you want to hit on your, I mean, this is my question too, but your setup for that?
Yeah. So when I was filming that, I use it's just like any monopod essentially. I have a carbon fiber one. It's a little lighter. I mount like sometimes I've noticed, like we were using a helicopter for this clip, and sometimes when I have two cameras up front, I get a little sidetracked and can't, like my brain just doesn't work super well. So I had one on the front in 8x7, 4K 60. I had one facing me to get the kind of shot of me filming. And then I also was running a mouth cam just to kind of get all the angles. Cause like on that day, for instance, we only had one take and that was the only shot we were able to film. But I think Abe, you could touch on like, I'm always so psyched when I see your like dual camera rig where like you're able to shoot slow motion and, you know, kind of like your standard 60 frames.
Yeah. But were you using a mic or anything, or was that just stock camera?
I tried kind of a new lav mic. And then what I actually did, Brandon was running the Max and the lav mic, something happened with the connection because he had it pointed straight. The audio off the Max sounded really good. So I just synced the Max audio to my clip so that the audio is coming from Brandon and not from myself.
Nice. Yeah, I think probably a common misconception that you use gimbals all the time, but that was no gimbal, correct?
Yeah. And so, you know, I know in like the profile photo, you kind of see me with like a 3D printed thing on my gimbal. And I went through a phase where I was super against hypersmooth because it just like, it just totally ruined like every notion that I built my career on basically. In the beginning, it was more glitchy. And I was a fan of shooting 1/180 or like just 180 degree shutter so that you would double your frame rate.
Yeah.
And what I noticed is when I first started using that 180 degree shutter rule, the hypersmooth wouldn't work. And this was with Hero 7. And so I just stuck to the gimbal, and I noticed with snowboarding too, sometimes like when I'm like filming Sage on a really big jump, I might not be the most put together in the air. So the gimbal would really like help me out and just keep that camera tracking smooth. And, you know, I still wish that GoPro would just make a gimbal for just to have as an option for, you know, certain types of applications. But the new hypersmooth and like, I've been trying to call Abe to talk about the new ND filters and hypersmooth anyway, so this is a great opportunity for everybody to learn. But between the new hypersmooth on the 13 and the in-camera denoise, I think I've noticeably noticed just in my editing and I've only shot on it like really 3 days, but everything is the most put together of all the cameras on a professional level. I've been really stoked on that, but that clip was just GoPro on a pole, no fancy effects. And it was just max audio. That was audio on it.
That's super sick. What would you say we got a few questions here as well. But first of all, what would you say is your split between running with a gimbal and kind of not having the gimbal on when you do your follow cams?
I would say the last 2 years, like Sage and I have tried to use the gimbal, and pretty much every third-party gimbal is just so bad that they don't really work that well. I've probably bought like 10 different models, and I always go back to a 3D printed Karma grip, but then the Karma grip hasn't been updated in so many years that it's just really not reliable. And the Hero 7 was much lighter than the new camera, so it's not calibrated for the same weight. But the reason the Karma grip was, I thought, the best gimbal on the market was it was made for GoPro, and it could handle any type of impact you put towards it, so you wouldn't get the camera tilting, and it was fast enough to keep up with the movements in action sports. I think my dream is definitely for a GoPro gimbal so that I could put this new, essentially, I think it's just as good as like a Red Komodo quality. And if you could just put that on something stabilized closer and get the 180-degree shutter, that would be, you know, my dream. But the hyper smooth with the ND filters, I've been playing it pretty cautious and just using ND16 so far. And I've been riding a lot of soft snow, so it's pretty easy to keep the camera level and balanced. And I've been really stoked. I really just had one day. That clip that we just watched was actually shot on Hero 12. So that was Hero 12 GP log, 4K 60, 8x7. And that was professionally color graded by the colorist that I work with. So he was working in DaVinci Resolve, and that was his take on the color from my clip.
Nice.
Super sick. And Andrea had a question here before Abe, and you can start talking about the ND filters and stuff. But I was thinking, Spencer and Sage, do you guys plan the shots before descending from the peaks?
Yeah. I think I was gonna touch on that when you were talking about just the gimbal and versus just the stick. Spencer, is I think just having a plan if you're gonna go film, especially with a follow cam, and say like me and Spencer will talk for anywhere from 1 minute to like 5 or 10 minutes of like what I want to do and where he's gonna be for the shot. So then when we do it, I know exactly where he's gonna be, and he knows what I'm gonna go do. So he can adjust if he sees me going somewhere else. He knows maybe something went wrong, I gotta adjust or something, you know. But we'll talk for minutes on end of like where we want to be, what trick I'm gonna do, or where I'm gonna turn, so that you get that good moment. And it's not just like, oh, I'm gonna follow you down the run, because if I'm gonna do a frontside 3 off a cliff, we want Spencer to be, I don't want it to be my butt in the shot the whole time. So we want him on my rider's right underneath the cliff. So we'll talk about all those things before.
Yeah. And I think one thing that we've been doing a lot more of like the last couple of years is like in the park, it's a little different. I feel like in the park, we usually just start together because there's no snow moving. And but snow management in the backcountry is a serious issue for everyone, safety wise and shot wise. And I feel like a lot of our best shots, I might go halfway down to the feature so that I can kind of control the pace of the shot, where like Sage is going to take the speed he wants. And then I have a mental map knowing the time it's going to take Sage to go from point A to B. And that does come with experience. But sometimes, you know, like some of my best shots, I've been pretty close down to the feature. I just start moving slower. By the time Sage hits it, I'm kind of going full speed, and then we can kind of come together on the landing. And, you know, I think, you know, like Abe, I think it was you that set up the camera for that one bald face down the Boomers run. But like, I would say that was a very mystic, just rarity, where like we didn't know where we were going. We didn't know what was below.
Yeah, but one of the like 1 in 100 that work out.
Yeah, like for every one clip that goes viral like that clip, we blow probably like
or you won't blow, but there's like a moment here and a moment there and a moment here, but it's not this fluid piece.
And it really works like I would say, you know, I've rode a lot with like Sage and Jamie both, and I would say, you know, like one thing with Jamie is snowboarding. She doesn't always think about where I am, and Jamie rides really fast. So like if I mess up a little turn, it's really hard to catch up to her sometimes. But Sage is really good at like keeping his line fluid, and he knows pretty much wherever I am on the mountain, he knows like what that's looking like. And he'll like, it's kind of like a cat and mouse game where like, you know, you got to play with the camera, and maybe you want to blast down the mountain, but you know that there's a couple trees that like I can't see. So like you just throw a turn and like, you know, throw up snow, and it actually slows you down where like I can keep the pace. So it's as much as people think maybe it's we're just dropping in and what happens. It's like completely choreographed.
Yeah, and
I feel like all the best shots kind of are.
Yeah, and should be, right? Because I think it also, like, you see when people are just following for fun, you can't really read the rider, and then you kind of end up too far away and you speed up and you come too close. And what's really great with a lot of your shots in here is like you get that kind of constant fluidity and the tricks from the right angle and stuff. So
Yeah.
fully see
And
that.
like back to that shot we just watched, like Brandon took a photo, like we took an extra 5 minutes and he took a photo of the run and drew the line on the phone. So I knew exactly, and then I drew my line so that he knew exactly where we were going. But when it comes to the backcountry and even in the park on a jump, I would say like in the air on any sizable jump is just as dangerous as in the backcountry if you don't know the trick the rider is doing. Because my main thing all the time is safety, and the last thing you want to do is be on the inside of a trick where you're expecting them to go the other way and you're maybe trying to get close to them and they're drifting into you. So it's like really understanding and being comfortable with the rider or skier before you go into the shot is first and foremost the easiest way to get things done.
Yeah. And then Jan had a question here about your frame rates. What did you say that you normally shoot with kind of on that clip? What frame rate did you normally like? Yeah.
I've gone through phases. With Hypersmooth, I'm pretty much 60 frames across the board. If there's a specific, like if we're going for a moment, that's when I would put it in like a 16:9 120 or a 16:9 240. With the new camera, I'm really excited to try. I think Abe can touch on it more, but there's like a burst mode on 5K 120. And I think it's like, what is it, 720p 400 frames. And those would be, I think it only records for about 15 seconds. So you're going for a moment within, whether it be a jump or a pow turn or whatnot. But I would say 90% of the time I'm just filming at 60 frames. It gives you great motion blur. I think Hypersmooth likes it. And like, I don't know enough with the new camera yet if it can handle like shooting it like 24 with a 48 shutter. Like I think without a gimbal, I don't have enough stability. Whereas like you probably could pull that off with an FPV drone, because the drone at that speed is going pretty smooth. So that's why a lot of the FPV drones will have a similar motion blur to what I used to have on my gimbal. And I think like at least going into this year, unless Abe's got some magical device up his sleeves, I'm just, last year I tried to mess with the gimbals and it's just too complicated. When like the last thing you want is, and it's happened to Sage and I on a helicopter trip where the gimbal just like craps out, and then you're at the top of a run, everybody's got to wait 10 more minutes for you to change everything around. And I think for simplicity lately I've just been running Hypersmooth 60 frames, and if we're going to get an exact moment, maybe I switch it into 120.
Nice.
Abe, yeah, what would you say is like the main difference with the new one and with the Hypersmooth and stuff like that?
Yeah, I can touch on the whole. It seems like there's a lot of questions about shutter speed and ND filters and Hypersmooth, and I could just sort of touch on the general subject. So first of all, and then I'll touch on the ND filters. But basically, there's no way around the conflict between slow shutter speeds and Hypersmooth, and then even post stabilization software like RealSteady or GyroFlow. It's all doing the same thing. Hypersmooth, RealSteady, GyroFlow, they all are doing post stabilization based on the data that's written into the GoPro file, the GPMF file. So the camera knows at every millisecond where in space it is and where it should be relative to if you were going to stabilize it. So none of that stuff does visual post fixing of it. It's all just straight based on data. And the problem comes if you have a slow shutter speed. you are basically forcing motion blur. That's what we're all after, right? We want motion blur in the direction that we're traveling because it gives you a sense of speed. It looks cinematic. But if you're shaking the camera, which you don't really realize that you are, but as you're going down, you're shaking and the camera's going like this and it's going like this, the motion blur is going to be sideways, up ways, diagonal ways, and it's going to be bouncing all around. Meanwhile, the camera, when you do the stabilization, is going to place where it knows that the frame should be, but the blur is bouncing in all different directions. So that's why it looks ghosty. If you've ever seen content that people shoot, it looks really ghosty. In previous GoPros, what we do to negate this is we turn down the effect of hypersmooth as the camera thinks it's getting darker. And the same thing happens with ND filters. If you add an ND32, the GoPro is going to say, ooh, it's pretty dark outside. I know that there's going to be some motion blur. I don't want to mess up your shot. So I'm just going to turn down hypersmooth, because if you turn off the stabilization, it just looks like a shaky shot and nothing looks weird. You're not getting ghosting because the shot is just shaky. And then previously, we fixed this with gimbals, because gimbals takes out all of the shakes. So the only motion that you're getting is in the downward direction, which gives you that perfect motion blur, whether you're POV mountain biking or doing follow cams. So there's no magic fix. I think what you can do, and what we've done a lot of testing with, is find the sweet spot where the direction that you're traveling gives you some motion blur, but the shakes that are happening to you aren't fast enough that are picking up motion blur in those directions. And what we do with the new ND filters is there's two different modes in the camera right now. And so there's it goes into a thing called auto cinematic shutter. And first of all, when you're in that, the camera changes all of the settings inside, which makes it, previously without auto cinematic shutter, it would always go for the shortest shutter speed possible, because it knows that hypersmooth likes short shutter speed. So it's going to use ISO to gain up the camera as much as possible to get the shortest shutter speed. When you're using an ND filter, you don't want short shutter speeds, you want long shutter speeds. And you also don't want high ISO, because that's just going to give you grainy footage. And so I always tell people, if you're putting an ND filter on, put your max ISO at 100. Otherwise, you're just telling the camera to get more grainy for no reason, because it's going to go to the highest ISO it can. And the effect that you just put on with the ND filters isn't going to matter. And so if you're not using a Hero 13, I recommend just locking your ISO at 100. So then you have the least amount of noise, and it's just going to immediately go to the shutter speed to try to give you longer shutter speeds. And I always use an auto shutter. It worked fine for me. And then with the ND, or with the Hero 13, the auto cinematic setting does that in camera automatically. It prioritizes the lowest shutter possible. So you could even have a large ISO range, 100 to 3200 if you wanted to. And the camera will prioritize the lowest ISO to try to get that perfect shutter speed. And then in the shutter speed, or there's a motion blur setting now, there's a high and an auto, and high will always try to go to that 180-degree shutter speed. But what's nice about it is if you go into shadows and stuff, it'll use the ISO and gain up. So it'll try to keep that 180, but then it won't, normally if you're locking your shutter speed, if you go into dark trees, it's just going to get black and dark. And so now with the Hero 13, it's going to be able to fluctuate using the ISO. And then if you go into too bright, or let's say your ND filter is not strong enough, the shutter speed will drop down away from that 180-degree shutter. The 180-degree shutter is not good for hypersmooth. That's what you would want to do if you have a very stable mounting, or if you have a gimbal. But then we also have auto motion blur, and that is that sweet spot where we found you can get some motion blur, but it's not going to be super ghosty and bouncing around. And I'm actually working with GoPro to add another setting, because sometimes that's even not it's too shaky and you do get some ghosting. And so hopefully in the future we'll have another setting that's even more bomb proof. But that's kind of the gist of the shutter speed debacle. But for Hero 13, if you're using the new GoPro filters, it's really easy to just like slap on an ND16 or ND32, keep your ISO range open to 100 to 1600, and then use the auto, and still just be conscious of it's not going to solve physics for you. So if you're going to have a mounting, either have a steady hand in your follow cam, or if you're doing mounting to your body or something, mount it to something that's still stable, so you can try to get that motion blur in this direction and not in the shaky direction. So I always think about this like mountain biking. I'm going to put it on my chin on my helmet because I know that that's more stable than a chest mount. And then I can still use the ND filters, do auto cinematic, auto shutter, and then it'll get me a good enough amount of motion blur down the trail. And it's actually quite a good effect. And that was very long-winded. Hopefully some of you caught that.
No, that was a good, I thought that was a good explanation. I didn't know that's how it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's super
Sage
good.
is over here like
Mind expanded.
I got a comment from Tin in our chat, like, let's ask Sage something now, because it looks like his mind is getting exploded.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, it makes sense. And they're like, I don't get that. I don't get that.
But it's funny, every time we have these calls, it's a lot of these type of questions which people come back to, both like technical camera stuff or storytelling or in design. So it's super good that you're kind of going through this, Abe, because I think that's what we also saw from a lot of the questions we got ahead of time. That was one of the kind of big questions that people were kind of wondering.
Yeah.
I have a question for Sage. What do you do? What's the first thing you do when we set up your POV camera and you're going through trees?
You lock the exposure.
Yeah. So it doesn't go in and out, and it just, and Abe kind of spoke of the other thing where, you leave your ISO in a range so that when you go in trees, it'll expose. But sometimes the more professional look is to lock everything so it does get dark. And maybe you want it to be dark, and when you pop out in the sun, it's a smooth exposure.
Yeah.
But when Sage
that helps so much.
Yeah, it makes it look. And then
or
on
even if it's a long run and you go into even just shade, if it's not trees, like if it's some long spring days, you're going from sun to shady spots, it helps a lot.
And on the max, then I maybe it was just my max, but I found that when I locked the exposure, like in Japan, I messed up the best run of my life and a great run of Sage by locking it, because I was trying to lock it on the right thing, but on the max screen it's a little harder to do.
Yeah.
But hemisphere exposure, I've never really messed up with hemisphere exposure.
After we did that, we didn't miss one shot.
We nailed everything after that.
Yeah.
You remembered. That's good.
Hey, I try. And put the lens in the snow when it's hot and lock your exposure. That's my job.
Yeah, that's another good one, is even in the park or anytime. And Travis actually told me this on that CMH trip, but put a snowball on the lens before you drop in, and then you're basically freezing the lens at the same temp as the snow. So if it's kind of at that temp where it might be a little warm and snow could stick to the lens, it doesn't stick to the lens. It just blows right off.
That one helps, because people all the time are like, how do I not get snow in the lens? It's it's because your lens is hot and the snow wants to stick to it. So
yeah, snowballs. But then you got to make sure you clean the lens off right before. Yeah. So it's best to have a buddy for that one.
Yeah.
And then we can take, I think your Go Ball had a good one about like just like general work, how you manage stress and pressure when you work with these big companies. But I think I want to take that. I just want to go back to one more thing when we were talking about shutter speeds. Sanyu asked here, what about 400 FPS? I guess that's also relating to you guys, like with super slow-mo and slow-mo. How much do you shoot with these like super slow-mo? Abe, you normally set up 2 cameras, right? Where you have one, which is real time. Do you want to just talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, the 400 FPS, I'm not sure what the question is related to, but there is a new 400 FPS mode in the Hero 13. It's a burst slow-mo, so it can do up to 15 seconds. When you slow that down, it's over 2 minutes of video, which is kind of crazy. Yeah, it's 720p. It's kind of like a cropped in version of the video, but it's still, I'd say it's useful for very specific things. I've been using it in conjunction with the new macro lens, and like I stuck it in a fire and had full close focus. So like the resolution part of it, you couldn't really tell. And I have it right now in a 4K timeline all blown up, and it actually looks pretty good, which is pretty cool. I think there's probably also some cool use cases if you did do 2 cameras side by side where you could use the like slow motion data from one visually and then do like a 5K video on the other side. And I know that some people can get tricky with that kind of stuff where you're, rather than interpolating slow motion frames, you actually have the visual data of everything. So you could potentially do like high resolution, super slow-mo video. I've seen some very smart minds do that kind of stuff if you have 2 cameras side by side.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So
we'll didn't know that was the thing.
Well, Sage, another one for you. Just then, like generally, if we go away from a few techie things now for a while and just go over this, how do you normally like manage stress, pressure, and working through self-doubt, and if any, like expectations you set for yourself when you get a big opportunity to go on projects like that, and spending all the same thing, you know, when you come to the slope, like the video you showed us, right? Like it is, you know, you're only going to get one run. It's very rare that you get like to go 2 people down a slope like that. Like, how do you manage that stress and pressure?
Yeah, I think that's a question I get a lot, is like, how do you manage the pressure? How do you manage stress? And like situations that are always changing too. They're not always the same. You know, you don't show up, you know, to a field and it's the same thing every time. It's always a different feature or a different day and different snow conditions, different avalanche conditions. Or if you're in a park, it could be a really scary jump. For me, what I do is I just try to act like it's every other day. You know, like I've been snowboarding since I was 5. How many times have I dropped in and done a 360? I'm like, okay, I've done a 360 a million times. I can do it on this cliff when Spencer's right there with me. Like I can do that first try, know it. And just like walking myself through and visualizing landing it. That's the biggest thing I think. I've talked to like sports psychologists and stuff too. Like visualization is so key in succeeding in anything in life, because if you see yourself doing something, whether it's a trick or just, you know, where you want to get in life, a goal or whatever, you're seeing yourself do that in the process that it takes to do it, you know. So I'll sit there at the top and just go through like the motion of a front 3. Like, okay, I gotta get the front 3 off this cliff. It's so easy. Drop the shoulder, spot the landing. Like the cliff's gonna be this big. Like I think of all that stuff. I like, even when I go out, I'll feel the snow. That's like if it's kind of wet that day, if it's super deep, and like I'll adjust my landing to how the snow feels. And so for me, I just, you know, visualize, and I just talk through with myself a lot.
Yeah, I would follow that up with kind of the exact same. I think in the beginning days, I was probably a bit more nervous and just like a head case when I was filming. And I feel like the most important thing now is just, if you've done your homework and you know your crew, you're prepared, I feel like that's when I feel the most confident. Like when I'm working with Sage and his filmer Germ, and we have Judd and a good guide there. I know that all of us have done our homework and we're all ready for that moment. And I think, back to that Chile clip, I wasn't sure how the snow was going to run necessarily on that run because we hadn't rode it. We rode next to it, but the sun was baking it. So I kind of started with the camera high because in my experience in POW, when you start with the camera low, then there's the opportunity for it to get hit with snow right away. So like I knew if I kept the camera high, there's no way his snow was going to get on the lens. So I wasn't nervous about that at all. We had done, I think that was our 4th run. So I knew the snow was stable. We were just kind of stacking tracks. And, we had 2 guides there on site. There were eyes on us. And Brandon and I drew the line. And so we visualized, I already knew what the shot was going to look like before we shot it. And I feel like in all of the most like high stakes moments of my life, it's just, if you've done your homework, just like Sage talked about with adjusting the landing, knowing the snow conditions, then that's what you're here to do. So you just at that point got to go and do it. And I remember like maybe it was like 5 years ago, I was walking up to like X Games Big Air with Red Gerard, and he wasn't in the final, but we were both going to practice, and he kind of looked at me and he was like, "You nervous?" Because I had the broadcast rig. And a lot of people ask me like how to get into follow camming and doing jumps, and the thing for me was I would, from ages really like age 11 to 20, I wanted to be a pro snowboarder and try and make the Olympic team. So I was trying to do all these tricks, and then it got to a point where it was like, you're telling me I just got to hit the jump? And like, then it was, I knew that every single time I could hit the jump. There's not even at any point did it cross my mind that I was going to fall. And so it was just a game of like, how close am I going to try and get, and how comfortable am I with the rider? And like Sage, for instance, I know 100% of the time he's not going to drift on certain tricks. I know Sven is going to drift the opposite way. I know Jamie is going to drift at me. Like I know the different games that people play, and then on certain tricks, how their drift might affect the way I film. I remember Sage, we filmed like that. You did like a backside 1080 rewind. Yeah. And we were trying to do probably the most technical jump follow cam.
That was crazy.
Where it was like behind
to
my
this
back.
Day, yeah.
And I essentially like, I think, yeah, I basically kind of had to do a back one, but like Sage is goofy. So he's on the right side of the lip. I'm on the left side of the lip. And that makes it really easy for me to be in front, because if I look over my right shoulder, I can see Sage. But Sage is going to drift to the left. But when he lands, his face is going to be facing the other way. So I have to drift to the right. And when you're doing this in front of each other on like I don't know, that's for sure over
70 foot jump. Yeah.
And it was pretty poppy and like you're going fast. But we were so like it wasn't like we did that right away. We'd both probably hit the jump, I don't know, a lot of times. And we were feeling good on it. So I think we did it one time and maybe it didn't work out. And then the second time it was just like, we basically did an X in the air. And then when I landed immediately, like I landed at 90 degrees and then filmed his landing switch. But by that point on the second go, I knew exactly what it was going to look like when we did it. And then it happened and it was like, don't think I'll ever try that again. But
yeah, one of those moments you trust in yourself, right?
Yeah.
That was like one of the craziest fall cams ever. And
just like, yeah, I just remembered just on big jumps, it's like always scary because I'm not at all thinking about snowboarding at any point. And that's kind of a scary thought
Yeah.
When on like a 70-foot jump,
Snowboarding is
it's like
secondary.
a rut. So it all has to be definitely like the right conditions and right timing. But back to the homework thing, you know.
Yeah. And to touch on one last thing on that question is that we really do is working through self-doubt is, I mean, like I remember when we built Chad's Gap 5 years ago and we were doing the build, I'm like super excited. I wanted to hit this thing since I was a kid. We're building it, you know, tensions are kind of going and, you know, you end up in the drop in and you're like, why am I here? Like, this is so gnarly. And I'm thinking of the trick I wanted to try on it was a backside 12 because I knew no one had done a 1080 on it, and I was like, I want to put something in for like the history book, so I want to do a 1260. And I'm like, why am I thinking like this? Like, why can't I just like 720 this thing? And I was like, because like that's not who you are, you know, like you got to trust yourself. Like you can do this. There's a reason you built it. There's a reason you spent 3 days shoveling and building this whole jump because like, but you can, and you just got to trust yourself. And then, you know, I just talked through with myself all the time in my head. I'm like, you can do this. Like, how many 1260s have you done? How long has it taken to build this thing? Like, you're not going to go home not trying this. Like, you're going to die trying if you have to. So I think just really like back to the basics of like giving yourself confidence, talking to yourself in a positive way. And like everyone's gonna have doubts. Like you talk to any professional sports person or anyone that's done big shoots, whether it's filming, anything, people have self-doubts. That's a reality of life. But you got to talk to yourself in a positive manner and get yourself through that.
Super, super good. Abe, do you have anything you want to fill out on that, or is it just?
Yeah, I mean, I had a specific situation last year at work, and I think my stuff is a little less on the individual shots or like shots for the movie, and sometimes for GoPro, I'm directing big shoots. Like we did a shoot at Baldface last year. So last year, maybe 2 years ago now. But we had almost our entire snow team. And when we plan out these shoots, there's a lot of planning that goes into them, and it will be for a new launch campaign. And so I get a list of all the needs from all the different departments, and then we plan out, okay, like if we have Sage and Spenny and Travis and Jamie and all these people, what do we need from each of them, and how many days do we think it's going to take? And so we're like, great, we've got 3 days at Baldface. We can start by warming up and start to pick off the easy stuff first, and you kind of work your way up, but you never know what the weather's going to do. And best case scenario is you get 3 perfect days and you can kind of work your way up, or it starts with kind of crappy weather and it starts to snow, and you can kind of like figure out the program, get your feet under you, see the dynamics of how people are working together, and then sort of like build your way up to it. But we looked at the forecast and it was like full sun the first day, full storm day the second day, and then just kind of like cloudy, cold, powdery snow. And for us at GoPro, we know that if we're going to get a launch worthy shot or marketing campaigns, it's going to be on a sunny day, just because that stuff pops so much better than the cloudy stuff. Mm-hmm. And so going into it, it was like, cool, I have like 6 filmer staff, I have 8 professional athletes, and we basically have to like get the shots on the first day. And so it's just kind of like, I remember being a little bit stressed, but I think like we've done it so much. And as these guys mentioned, it's another day of kind of like, if you were to show up to the Mammoth Terrain Park with your homies, like how would you work with them to get stuff done? And you just methodically work with everybody. You say, cool, we're just gonna bang it out, and every single run we're gonna just check stuff off the list as best as we can, and then kind of just see what happens. And so I think there's instances where you think that you're going to be stressed, but in the moment it's kind of like everybody is such a professional at what they do, whether it's my filmmakers that I'm working with or the athletes that it just kind of all falls into place and everything typically works out, provided that you've done your homework and you have that knowledge of, hey, we actually do need to get the shots that we need. What are the ones that we can't live without? Let's check those off first. And then we can do that and feel like we've been productive. And then the next couple days sort of fell into place because we had just had epic POW and everybody was able to play and have fun and enjoy themselves.
Yeah, but I think it comes back to, you know, both what you, Sage, and Abe said, and we've had this question on multiple creative exchanges before, and I think a lot kind of ties back to this kind of homework and kind of, you know, almost like creating your own luck by being prepared and also like knowing kind of the routine that makes you feel in control. Even Marcelo, like the big campaign we did with the footballer, was the same thing. It was all about like, you know, doing a few steps so you know that, okay, I know this, and I have prepared for this so long, and these are the things I need to deliver that day. I think it's, especially on shoots, Abe, I totally feel you there at always having a clear vision of like these things we need to get if it is a good day, and then kind of, okay, then we have a list of what kind of follows after.
Yeah, and I think I see a couple questions about just planning out your shoots and do you know what you need to get. I think that's, for a shoot like that, it's extremely imperative to know what you need to get out of the shoot, and then what's just kind of like, hey, we'll just do this for fun and see what comes out of it. I know that I can put Spenny and Sage or Spenny and anybody together and just let them do their thing, and they'll get good shots that we can end up using for marketing material. So that's like one piece of the puzzle that I can take myself out of. But yeah, we definitely have a list of assets that we know that we need to get. And I work with the team and we plan out like, okay, which is the run that we need to get this and this and this. And whether it's like, I need a slow motion Travis Rice pass by where he's wearing a new Hero 13 on his head, and I'm doing a 2 camera rig, 1 slow-mo, 1 high resolution for photos or photo burst, and I need to make sure that I get that pass by moment. And so I work with the people at Baldface, the guides, and I say, these are my shots that I want to try to get. What's the best place that you recommend that I try to do this shot and this shot and this shot? And they're like, okay, well, it's a drone shot, let's do that at the burn because that's wide open and you can fly the drone. If it's that pass by shot with Travis, let's do that at the highest peak because it's really open and beautiful and it's going to be sunny over there. So let's knock that out. And so I just kind of like have that running list of stuff. And as long as as soon as the cat stops, or even as soon as you get in the snow cat, you can get everybody prepared. I look at Sage and I'm like, you good with your camera? You got your POV, everything's good, sweet, okay. And then I look at Travis, you got your head cam, can we get Travis a head cam? Can we get him dialed? And then I'll have my rig set up so I'm ready to go. And then when you get out of the cat, to avoid being completely flustered with a bunch of people coming at you, you've already done all the work. So you just get out and you look at your filmers, you know what to do, you know what to do, you know what to do. You guys all have cameras, great, let's do this.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I've seen, I don't know when that picture was, but it was after one of your launches, you posted a picture of the team and like the full storyboard you had like up on the wall of like where you could see all of that. And that's how we work at DB as well. Like really try to plan it out, because I think that's one of the biggest differences. It comes back to the same thing we talked about with the follow cam stuff, right? That the better you kind of can plan it, and even the transitions and how you want to do it, the easier it just becomes on the day to know what you need. So I think that feels like a common mistake, even like when you're shooting YouTube vlogs or anything, when you're shooting content, you just go out, you shoot everything for a full day, and you come home stacked with so much content that you don't really know what you want to do with it or what story you want to tell. And I think what differentiates a lot with the people that we work with at DB, and I think we had a question as well here, like advice for young creators, how to start working with bigger outdoor brands and stuff. And I think and grow on socials. And I think like one of the main things that we've seen is like the people we work with normally have an idea of a story before they go out and shoot, because then kind of the content they come back with is a little bit more meaningful. It goes faster to edit and all of that. So I think that's kind of a big key takeaway, that it normally helps being a little bit like aware of what you want to shoot and what story you want to tell.
Yeah, and I would say also on the flip side of that, there is some value to serendipity and just sort of like letting things flow.
Yeah.
I think that's how a lot of the stories come together, because you don't know fully the story that's gonna play out and what's and it's like being able to identify in the moment, like, oh my gosh, this is the story, this is the conflict, let's make sure that we have coverage of this. But also just, I think for us at GoPro, it's probably different than a brand like DB, where you do have a very specific thing in mind. Sometimes it's like, hey, at GoPro, let's make sure that we have coverage of everything. So we have head cams on this person and this person and this person, and we put them in the element. We've kind of like done all the homework to put them into a little playground where we know that something will play out. And that's like, let's put Spenny and Sage together, but let's make sure that they both have head cams, so that whatever happens, they're going to have some sort of interaction, which is a good story that will play out. But I have coverage, whereas I have POV, I have audio, I have all the things that I need to tell this little packaged moment together.
Yeah. And I fully agree there, but then it's still, still planned out in the form of that you kind of put them in a bubble, and you've kind of already kind of figured out like, okay, they're going to go out. There's most probably going to be a reaction after they landed. So it's important that we have a head cam on, and let's put Spenny with a gimbal because he's good at that. And then you let the actions play, but it's still kind of planned in the form of, you kind of have an idea what settings you want to have, because you kind of know what they're going to do and stuff like that, I guess.
I saw a good question, and Spenny, I'm sure that you can touch on this, but it was, why don't you just use an FPV drone instead of doing follow cams?
Yeah.
I think for me, the amount of more personal situations that you get with a follow cam, you're with the athlete at the top, you're with the athlete midway through, you can definitely get closer. An FPV drone might get close in like one little instance where it's like they almost hit each other. But then you're also with the athlete on the landing, where you're having that real moment of interaction. Whereas for me personally, whenever I see an FPV shot, it's a really cool moment right off the jump, but you're not getting the same sort of human to human personal interaction of like two people that are amping each other up and amped on the entire exchange, which comes across as very much more authentic emotion to the user, because you're behind the screen watching somebody have this amazing emotional reaction with a buddy of theirs.
Yeah, and I think just to like touch on that, like there's a tool for every job. And back to your shot list, I think using an FPV drone to get that far away scenic, to show the scale of what's going on, and then maybe you cut to the follow cam to like get that close like riding moment. Like I just remember I did a project last year with Judd Hankey's, and it was an 18-month project where I think I shot over 50 terabytes for it. And to kind of touch on like Abe's shot list thing, I think the number one thing you can do is like, we knew the songs that the project was going to be. So as soon as and we were going for all A grade, and we were mixing surf and snow. So it was like, I started like at a certain point putting a cut together, and then, I put the shots where I wanted it, and I visualized what I wanted this thing to look like. And then, it wasn't like, oh, we're just going to, this wave to shoot X amount of waves. Is like, oh, we need 4 waves. And then it was like, oh, I need 1 aerial shot. Because like that FPV shot or a heli shot, whatever, it can tell the whole story in what's going on. Whereas like with a follow cam, sometimes it's hard to get that like elevation that you need. But I think, for me, exactly what Abe said, it's like, I think, when the situation allows, it's pretty rad to get the follow cam. But then, it's like when Sage is riding natural selection terrain, sometimes it's like you can't do the follow cam, because the terrain is too gnarly, or there isn't a line for me, or it's just, you're filming with multiple people. And if I'm going to film it, then I put a track in the snow. So there's situations where, both are, applicable. But I think like people who are like, oh, drones are taking over, oh, follow cams are done. It's like, you're just like,
Tool for
that's
every
just
job.
that's just such like a, uninformed, uneducated, opinion. But it's, you make it what it is.
Yeah, I think we're running slightly over, because I was thinking just kind of starting to tie it up, but I just wanted to comment on that as well, because before DB, I worked at Red Bull, and when we were doing a lot of athlete projects, it was so important, if we were filming Daniel Bodine, he was going to do a double backflip on a snowmobile. And there it's the same thing with the GoPro, right? Getting the reactions at the landing. Like, of course, we're going to have a drone in the air. Coming back to the why don't you use follow cam? Of course, that's great for some kind of content, but it is so important getting that human interaction, because that's normally what resonates with the audience on socials and on those like mobile platforms. So there, of course, we were going to release a very cinematic thing with drones and everything later, but the initial clip that went viral is actually the friend running up to Daniel, hand filming, shaky.
Yeah.
And that's what we launched with, because it is more relatable. It is easier to get the reaction. It's the same, with the basket hoop shot and having the reactions. It's so important. So I think sometimes people get quite stuck in settings and having the newest gear, but sometimes it's also just really important understanding where is this going to be posted and how do we kind of make it to become authentic, because that's also what we kind of see with the content direction we're going and what's starting to resonate with all the young people. It is more raw, it is more authentic in that sense, compared to like the super well curated part that was very famous on Instagram back in the days. Everything is becoming a little bit more real time. And then a last question. I think we had two, just like for you, Abe, and that was also if you have any like final tips on for young creators, if they want to become like sending in clips to GoPro, or how to come into kind of the outdoor industry. If you have any tips and tricks, same with you, Benny or Spenny. I think it would be kind of fun rounding up. If what would you tell your 18, 20, 16-year-old self of like 2 tricks on how to kind of pursue your guys' careers?
Yeah, those are great questions. I think I always go back to sort of the idea of finding what you're super passionate about and just kind of going for that for yourself. I think Spenny's a great example of it, where he has a niche and he just went for it, and people eventually will recognize you for your talents if what you're doing is quality work. And it's kind of like a matter of time until you get recognized for your work, if your work is great. And I think that's the very positive parts of social media, is there's so many different avenues now for somebody to display their body of work and for people to recognize you for being great at it. There's always a lot of people ask, how do I become a GoPro ambassador? How do I win GoPro awards? And it always is the same thing. I think if you're really passionate about what you're doing and you continually do it and you post and it's quality work, you will get recognized for it. And we have people at GoPro that are always looking at GoPro awards. We have people that are calling the social media channels of things that are posted at GoPro or hashtag GoPro. They'll always see it. And if we see amazing content, we have a full Slack channel where it's sort of like community review each week, where we go over all the things that we see on social, and they say, should we contact this person and try to grab this this piece of content, and should we try to share it, etc. So I'd just say continue down the path of what drives you in the morning, what is passionate for you. That's how I got my start. I know that's how Spenny got his foot in the door, and you will get recognized for it. It's a lot easier now than it certainly was way back in the day to get recognized for stuff like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think Abe's spot on with that. And I think the only thing, like I just saw in the comments, like, what would you tell your 20-year-old self? Get used to failing. And once you are not affected by failing, then that's when you'll succeed. Because I think, at least in these last couple of years, and I think like Sage and I, we both probably had the worst winter of our life last year. And, like the more you fail and the more you get over failing and just throw that out the window and don't let it affect the moment is when you're going to be successful. Because I don't know if I had a failed snowboard career. I was working sushi for an entire winter and I was snowboarding for me. I didn't even touch the terrain park. I just wanted to learn how to ride my snowboard as fast and get the best amount of board control that I could. And I went from, going to Australia and riding a terrain park for 30 days straight, only riding jumps, trying to do 1080s and 1260s and just failing at all of that, to you know what, I'm freaking over it. And the next season, I didn't even do anything bigger than a 720. But I started to pick up my GoPro, and, between working for Sushi and Peter Morning at Mammoth was like, hey, we got this series. I can get you a pass and $500. Are you down? And I was like, I didn't even ever contemplate being a GoPro filmer. And, I did that winter. And then the next winter I had the Trace thing. And that was just came out of I want to film, but I didn't even want to be a GoPro filmer. I wanted to be a travel influencer like Jay Alvarez and Sam Calder and all these other guys. And I knew that I could at least get my $2,000 a month from Trace if I convinced them to do it. And then, I remember that whole January to March, I was just trying to shoot sunset photos. But then I learned I post a sunset photo on my account, donut for likes, post a snowboard photo, people are down. And I was like, I want to figure out a name change. And someone else came up with the Gimbal God name. And, it was in the moment, I pretty much the last day of my last paid shoot for snowboarding, Stale asked me if I wanted to go to Locks with him in 2 days. And I just knew it was the right thing. And I was like, dude, I'm with the RK1 guys. I grew up watching these guys. I felt like the whole snowboard thing was out the door, and then it came right back. But I was like, I also had finals week of school. And it was just literally, and I remember on the airplane, I was like, I'm going to do both. And then it was after the first day, I was like, I'll always have school. I just never logged back in. I still don't know what grades I got that semester. And I just went all the way forward. And it was I knew at that moment that I had no safety net, and there was no option to not get to that point B. But I think to just comment on what Abe said about the passion is when you know what it is you love and what it is you want to do, you just got to go that way. And I see Olav just commented RK1 for life. Olav was, in the first, I grew up idolizing that guy and wanting, when I started working for Stale, I was like, well, Stale has worked with Frode Sandbeck and Olav and now me. And both of those two are beautiful psychopaths in their own way. So I was like, fuck, man, I have big shoulders to kind of follow up on. And I think, for those first 4 years, I didn't sleep more than 4 hours a night for 4 years. It was an average of 4 hours. Maybe there was a day I slept the whole day, But then for every day I slept, there was also 2 days I stayed up for 48 hours. So it was like, and I'm not recommending any of that is a healthy thing that I think that I would recommend dropping out of school and staying up or doing anything. But like, I feel like it's like when there's that thing in your mind that you know, and it's like Sage said, like when he like, after the 2002 Olympics, he just was strapped into a snowboard. It was like, there's that moment that like, you know, you can make it happen. And whether it's like, I got to, you know, drop the booze and drop the drugs and the partying and the friends to like focus on this, or, you know, whatever it is, it's like, if you can mentally do the hardest thing possible, then everything else is easy. And that's just like kind of like how I look at it. And like, you know, those formative first 5 years were so tough. And like, you know, even our Alaska trip that I had with Sage, you know, like it was a shocker. And like, you know, Sage was supposed to stay and then he left. And then it was just, I was kind of on my own on that trip with Torgeir, Judd, and Rene. And like the last day, like we probably spent the most amount of money I've ever spent for the least amount of shots. And I almost threw up from the stress 3 times because we crashed my red drone and then we couldn't get it to work while I have 3 riders up on this peak in Alaska. And it's like, I was just like, I feel like my last thing to wrap this up is like, don't try too hard. I tried too hard in my snowboard career and I failed. I think Sage and I both tried a little too hard last year. We kind of failed. You know, it's like, you got to find that flow and just like, you got to ride things, and it's okay when things don't work out. Don't like force it. Cause I feel like, at least in my career, every time I've tried to force something to happen, it just goes sideways. It's life's way of just saying like, you know, just be patient and like live in the moment. Don't focus so much on the future. And then I think that's a good monologue to wrap this up. But no, I mean, this has just been such a cool full circle moment. I mean, to like be on a live stream with like one of my favorite snowboarders and one of my favorite filmmakers a decade after, you know, I was that 20-year-old, you know, trying to figure out how I was going to pay rent that month. You know, it's pretty inspiring.
Same.
Hell yeah.
Sage, do you want to also just a recommendation? What would you say? What would you tell your 20-year-old self?
Yeah. What I tell my younger self is also, sorry, I traveled and I kind of got sick before this. So, yeah, what would I tell my younger self? Yeah, don't stop believing in yourself and I think a big thing is like surround yourself with like-minded people. You can see like, I think everyone in this group has like given each other compliments like this whole time. Like I've been a big fan of Abe and like Marcus does such a good job. Spenny and me, like when we link up, we always get clips together. And it's like when you surround yourself with people that also have maybe not the exact same goal as you, but they want to have the same aspirations, like you guys are all going to feed each other that energy. And if you're with people that aren't doing that and they're like negative or they don't see themselves going anywhere, you're like guilty by association and you're just going to go down that as well. So I would tell my younger self to just like surround yourself by people that want to go far in life and want to succeed and be happy. And it doesn't necessarily mean you be the biggest, best person, but like being happy and doing something that you love is so important. And finding people that want to do the same thing is like, I mean, look at Olav and RK1. Like when RK1 was firing, it was like everyone had this like vision, and it was. I was always watching RK1 edits. You know, they were like so big back in the day, and it's like a group of 6 snowboarders with like Olav behind the lens. It was so amazing to watch. So, yeah, surround yourself by people that want to do the same thing.
Yeah, and I think that's a super good wrap up, because I think that's also, this question has come up on almost every creative exchange we've held. And it's very similar. It's like specialize, find yourself kind of, you know, what you're really passionate about and how you're going to go far. And I think Sage, I wanted to fill in with that if you were not going to say it, but also surround yourself with people that are stoked, like-minded, and also kind of challenge you on the same way. So you kind of, so yeah, I think that was a super, super good wrapping. And I want to thank everybody who's listened live and everybody who's going to listen on the recorded session as well. This has been super, super fun. And it's so fun to kind of get this full circle moment, as you said, Spenny. It's been kind of a dream. We talked about this spring when we wanted to continue with these creative exchanges, and both Tin, me, and John at the office were like, we need to link these boys up again.
Sage, thanks for coming, because I didn't know you were going to come, but I
didn't think I was going to make it either. That I made it. I'm stoked.
I feel like it was a cool add-on.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you, Sage.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It was exciting.
Thank you so much. And Abe and Spenny as well, thank you so much for joining. And also, guys in the comments, please, if you have any more questions, we can kind of take those and we can send out an email to everybody who signed up for this with kind of follow-ups if we missed anything. And then also, if you have anybody else you want to have on the other creative exchanges, if there's any topic or people you guys want that we should kind of pull on here, let us know. Suggest people or brands or topics, and we will try to make it happen.
Awesome.
Sick. Okay, let's see how we close this down. Tin, you might need to help us.